There we go. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to session two of the third annual RMUS Tech Week. I am happy to be joined by two luminaries, one of those two things. Anyway, they're important, they're influential, and they're here with us today. And so we are going to have a discussion today regarding the use of drones in the current conflict in Ukraine. Our intent for today is to have these two fine gentlemen talk to us about some of the things that we've learned. Not so much. I know most of our customers are not operating drones in necessarily in a military environment, but the important thing is many of these innovations that we're seeing and many of these operations that we're seeing are going to speed adoption and are going to move over into some commercial use cases and more so than strictly military. And so this is ultimately going to have application to us all. And so I remember reading something in the past, and they talked about how most medical innovations happen during the war just because, or surgical anyway, just because there's so many injuries and they're so serious, and there's a lot lower standards for the risk people are willing to take to save people, which is probably a good thing. And so we tend to see that, and I think fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, that is here. So let's introduce our two panelists. First of all, I'm pleased to introduce Mike Dewhirst from Evolve Dynamics. So, Mike, why don't you introduce yourself and then give us a little bit of blurb about Evolve Dynamics as well?
Thanks very much. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. I'm Mike from Evolve Dynamics. I'm the founder and CTO of the company that started about 8 years ago. We actually started the company off the back of the invasion of Crimea by Russia that kind of triggered the desire to innovate. So you got a point there about, unfortunately, wars triggering accelerated innovation. So that's kind of how we got started. And then fast forward to where we are now. We have just under 40 staff. We've got offices in the UK, Ukraine, and in the US. We've actually got employees in Ukraine, so they're on the sharp end of this, if you might put it that way. And we have a number of systems that we've developed during that time. It's kind of like an ecosystem, I guess, of different products that all work together. The Sky Mantis that you can see behind me, different devices that can plug into it and work with it, a tethering system so they can keep it in the air for a lot longer, a video encoding and streaming solutions, a sub 250 gram system, and a bunch of others. So we've got various systems in Ukraine at the moment with the Ukraine army. We are actively working with end users over there to make sure that the systems are the most capable. And I'll be pleased to share some of the learnings with you. Obviously, some of them are a little bit sensitive, and now is probably not a great time to share them with everyone. But I will share what I can. So that's it for us as an introduction. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. All right, over to you. I would like to introduce our second panelist, the equally legendary Geoff Hitchcock from, I guess he's representing Teal, but technically, I guess you're representing Red Cat. So you may as well give us the whole kind of overview, Jeff, just so nobody's confused.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. Name's Geoff Hitchcock, 22-year retired Air Force Special Operator. When I got out of the Air Force, AFSOC specifically, had already bought some Raven systems, so I ended up joining AeroVironment. Spent 16 and a half years there. First 12 were running their flight operations, engineering, and production flight tests, demos, instructions, and services. And then I went to the dark side for sales. Been out of AV for about 2 years now into the quad space, which is new and very, very fast paced. Red Cat Holdings bought Teal drones out of Salt Lake City. Red Cat's in Puerto Rico. I work for them as a senior VP of global sales. We're focused primarily on defense, but we do first responders as well. Yep, and got some pretty good intel on what's going on in Ukraine and what we need to do to pivot from that. Again, thank you for joining us today.
All right, fantastic. Thank you both for these introductions. So, for our viewers, what we want to do today is really we want to kind of talk broadly about three themes. And first of all, we have this living laboratory of UAS that has really spilled over. So that the first question will be, what have we actually learned from all this, in terms of rapid iteration, what people are doing over there, what's happening. Secondly, then we'll talk about how is this affecting these two individuals as the company specifically, and then we'll talk a little bit about what changes do we see as an operator of the technology. And then the last thing, what do we see this is going to mean for us moving forward in terms of both new products, but need for different parts of the industry to sort of mature and grow, like the counter UAS side as well. Um, so let's get right into it. So why don't we start with you, Mike? So you mentioned you've been involved since the Crimean part of this conflict. So from your perspective, what are the biggest things that have evolved, and what have you really learned from that perspective?
Sure. So I think the number one thing is radios. So radio and resilient and reliable radio that is difficult to jam and that gives you options is one of the key things. So we started off with fairly standard radios. I apologize, I'm not going to share which exact radios we're using now or which ones we're switching out to or what we have available. But all of the usual suspects out there, I'll name a couple because they're so well known, like Silvus, Persistent Systems, Doodle Labs, all of those are the radios that we're working with, and then some other ones as well, a little bit less known. The key thing is modularity, it's adaptability, because the other side uses a lot of jamming technology and a lot of radio detection technology. So being able to work with radio in a very flexible way has been one of the key things that we had to pivot. So we had to become a radio agnostic company, and we had to make sure that we can integrate with whatever and whoever. The other thing as well to bear in mind is that there are already deployed radio systems on the front line, and if you are able to integrate with those, that's an advantage. Bringing your own is not always the best solution because you just can't play with the others then. So that's one of the main number one things. Navigation is another pretty key aspect. So GPS navigation is pretty much out of the window. It is not a reliable source of stabilizing or navigating your UAS or UAV. Other alternative methods must be provided to end users. There's various out there, visual navigation or advanced inertial navigation, or if GPS is absolutely must be provided in one way or another, then there are systems that we've been utilizing that can work with a number of jammers in the area. Obviously, there is a saturation point after which they're unable to survive, but there are systems out there that we've integrated that allow more robust GPS navigation, shall we say. So that's the second one. And then the third one is just various software features and integration points and APIs, and again, just being able to plug into other existing systems. The learnings that we took away in terms of what was already in our product that was an advantage and a benefit is speed of deployment. So being able to get the system out of the bag and in the air really rapidly is a massive aspect, as you can imagine. Weather. So in the first few weeks of the war, our systems, some of the days were some of the very few that were able to operate. When the winds are high and when there's snow, sleet and rain, a lot of systems out there won't be able to operate. And obviously operators out there have to be able to do their job no matter the weather. So you have to have a system that's able to match that. So that was pretty good. And then the last thing that I'll mention is the maintainability. So one of the things that we focused on when designing one of our products, Skymantis, that's the system you can see behind me, with the two cameras there, is that once all systems have problems, or all users might cause damage to the system one way or another. Could be something as simple as dropping it out of the bag. These things happen. If you have to send it back to the manufacturer for repair, this can be limiting, and being able to repair it in the field, depending on the obviously end user skill level, is also a big advantage. Our system can be repaired in the field to a point. We've been working with local partners to have our systems repaired where there's been some damage to them, and that's been really appreciated. So those are the main things. We can talk about others in a minute. I'm conscious of not being the only person here, so I'll pass over to Geoff to cover his experiences. Thank you, everyone.
Perfect. Well, that's a perfect segue. You make a fine host, Mike. So, Geoff, what about from Teal/Redcat? What are the big takeaways from you and your team there?
Well, the short answer is nothing really to add, but I could expand on a lot of what Michael said.
Sure.
Basically, first thing we learned, we have systems operating as well. We've delivered 15 systems over there about a year ago. Some of them are still flying. It's what it comes down to is really it comes down to modularity and repairability for sure in the field. Our system is designed that the gimbal can be replaced by the operator, broken arms can be replaced by the operator. So unless it comes down to open heart surgery and has to come back to us, it stays with them. The modularity aspect of it, the first thing we got asked is how much extra you can carry, and we're in the 1 kilo size class, right? So we can't carry as much, but obviously for kinetic, homemade kinetic, everybody was asking how much extra you can carry. So the modularity plays into your ability to expand your product offerings and your endurance and your payload capacity, because then you just redesign longer arms, bigger motors, bigger props, bigger battery. You can carry more stuff. Operating without GPS, we can operate our system without GPS, but it is I follow roads. So moving to true GPS denied navigation, both day and night, is some of the things that we're focused on. And then for the broad spectrum jamming, you have to be able to frequency hop and stuffing that to radio into our system quickly has proved to be a challenge. But we are exploring options for flying dark, where you load the mission and then you don't emit. So there is no jam to that. Other than that, it's about the same thing that Mike said. It's been very interesting to talk to the end users on what they're up against, and on the frequency hopping, adapting very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. So it's a constant challenge. But those are the highlights, the big heavy hitters: modularity, external payloads, GPS denied ops, and counter jam are the things we have to focus on.
Excellent. So, obviously, those are pretty big topics. So, particularly the looking at the different visual and INS, different navigation. So how do you, without maybe giving too much away, how do you see the broader solution looking for those kinds of situations, right? So obviously we deal with all kinds of situations that are similar, obviously not in the same thing with ECM or things like that, but where there is interference issues and other different issues. So what are you thinking preliminarily the solution will be to being able to make that happen with different kinds of navigation? So Mike, maybe throw that to you first.
Sure. So if I understood the question correctly, you're asking about alternative navigation methods and
Yes.
what's the path forward, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's a number of avenues. The industry is pretty rapidly trying to get a number of different solutions to the market. Everybody's working on it. There's Skydeas out there who were one of the first to come to market with a system like that, although it has limitations in the darker hours of the day. There's other companies with similar approaches, DJI or Autel, they all have visual alternative navigation. However, the technology, I think, is fairly early days for full 24/7 long range operation. And what you see on consumer systems at the moment is enough to keep the users safe if there's some initial GPS glitching within a small area that they're operating in, and to prevent them bumping into things, again, provided the lighting is correct. But that's kind of where we are at the moment. What we're working on at the moment at Evolve is making a system that is absolutely bulletproof, that will work day and night, that will work short and long range. So we're, without giving away too much, we are working on a system that will operate both at close range, so tens and hundreds of meters, where you've got obstacles and surfaces and things around you that you can kind of hook yourself onto. But equally, it will work at higher altitudes, at longer distances. There's different names for the latter, geo-referencing and whatnot. Basically, you are going off of the visuals under the aircraft, and you're matching it to existing preloaded maps. And as Geoff mentioned, the operating in the dark mode, where you can turn off the radio completely, send the system in to do the recon job, gather imagery and whatever other intelligence you need to collect, complete a mission based off a preset route and then return. That's ultimately what we're working on. We're probably at like TRL 6 on that front at the moment. If everyone's familiar with that, that's the NASA technical readiness level sort of scale, where 9 is in service and 0 is a back of a napkin. So we're kind of fairly far down the road after about 4 or 5 years of development, trial and error, and we're hoping to bring something out in the coming months that will help with that. One other thing I just wanted to add as well, in terms of radios and radio resilience and things like that, and emitting. So that there's other ways. There's autonomy, where you're flying a pre-planned mission, and then there's also tethering with data over the line. So we happen to have, and sorry for the blatant sales plug, but we do have a tether system that can run radio silent. So you basically put the system up where you don't turn the radio on. Radio is vulnerable in 2 ways. One is that you can be jammed, and then you can lose connection to the system, and then you're out of action. And secondly, you actually tell the world where you are with your radio transmitter, both from the aircraft and, worse and most importantly, from the ground station, where in the early days with the DJI drones, end users were actually getting mortar fire brought in on them fairly quickly after launch. So radio silent is a pretty big deal at the moment. So then last thing is the inertial and gyro systems, but those have fairly high drift and error building up as you operate on those. So they only have a certain range and time frame that they can be utilized in, or you have to acquire systems that price-wise, cost-wise, equal the whole aircraft. Those are military-grade, missile-grade systems. They are capable, but they are very expensive. And for the consumer world, they're definitely priced out the market. For the military, depending on who's footing the bill, a semi-viable solution, I would say, but then you're losing other benefits of visual navigation. So again, I'll park it there and pass the baton back.
Geoff, what are your thoughts on that?
We're taking the same basic approach. We're a very small company, so we've gone down the path of strategic partnerships with software developers specifically. Right, we as a semi startup, we can't bring on 40 engineers to do that, and we don't want to do that. Right, we'll make the airplane, and we'll put other people's stuff on it. So we have a couple different partnerships going down different paths to address the GPS tonight. I won't get into any of the specifics of it, but I think we're probably they're funded on various SIBRs for the USG, and we're picking and choosing winners on that, and we think we're going to be able to probably demonstrate that within the next 6 months or so, and from there it'll probably be another 6 months till it's productized. But basically the same thing Mike said. To address the GPS denied stuff, for right now, it's I follow roads, and the operators just have to be very familiar. One of the advantages we have in that space is we also have multi-vehicle control that we offer, which also gives you a second position. The air vehicles can ping off of each other to sweeten those solutions. And working with companies like Reveal for their Farsight software for 3D mapping, you can load that, and then you can ping off of that both day and night recordings. So it's a myriad of things that we're exploring that will then get smashed together into an offering for day-night GPS denied. But these are, everybody's working really hard on these, but it's never fast enough, right? It evolves daily. What's going on over in Ukraine right now, and it just takes time to pivot to get some of this stuff going. So we're learning a lot about what future battle spaces could look like, and invariably a lot of this will trickle down to first responders and commercial, years from now. But yeah, we're learning a lot. So are the people that we're working with.
Mm-hmm. So let's shift focus a little bit to some of the stuff on the ground. So Geoff, I'll stick with you on this one. So from an operating perspective, how have things changed with the way the drones are actually being operated versus how maybe you envisioned they would be operated when they were first on George's desk for design?
Yeah, having been in the UAS space for 20 years, it's how they're being operated there is, and operations in general there, right? Everybody way back in the day at AeroVironment wanted to be able to transmit coordinates directly into the cockpit to guide a missile onto a GPS target. Well, guess what? There's no fighters over there. So now they're having to plot artillery and mortars because there is no bomber coverage. So coming up with solutions to help them in that type of mission, how to get those center field of view coordinates out quickly. There's lots of the jamming is just not on the drones. The jamming is just on everything, and there are folks over there that are operating strictly on cells, right? Because they don't use any radios. Starlink, right? We've done some work on Starlink. Unfortunately, they dialed that back a little bit in Ukraine because it's not designated as humanitarian. But Starlink is a viable option for a lot of other places in the world. We're doing that offering that both commercially and to defense. I think going forward, you're going to see a lot of stuff, probably 5G LTE, after some of the lessons they've learned over in Ukraine, and that will become a standard offering versus your 1.8 gig or 2.4 or 5.8 900. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Okay, Mike, let's throw it back to you. How is the Evolve suite of products being used kind of differently than you thought it would be based on the field?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, we didn't have a lot of surprises in terms of how the drones were utilized and what sort of functions and missions that were put towards, because we kind of started back with the Crimean invasion, and we were, the way we started is we went out to the end users and we started asking, what do you need? What features do you need? Why? What do you have now, and why don't you like it? And then we took the feedback and designed Sky Mantis off the back of it. And this wasn't just in Ukraine, this was also in the UK. We went around all the police users. There's probably around a quarter, maybe a fifth of the UK police force uses our systems just for general policing. Organised crime as well, but general policing as well. And we took all of those features on board. So when we delivered back, the usage was kind of as expected. Radio jamming was a little bit more of a surprise than we hoped for. It was a major limiting factor right off the bat. But because we have a fairly long-range sensor, in the sense that the daylight is a 30 times HD zoom, we are able to have a better standoff from the potential target, and then you are a little bit less susceptible to jamming. Jamming is not deployed. I don't want to reveal too much. So jamming can be deployed, and in the area doesn't mean so. There's
Yeah, Mike,
soft spots and
I
things
think
like
you're breaking up just a bit there. Sorry, you're popping in and out. So we'll pause you for a second. So so one of the things that that I'd like to add on top of this too is one of the trends we're really seeing, which will kind of apply, I think, potentially to both of you, is the use of FPVs. So that was one of the things that was pretty shocking over there. And obviously, there's a lot of FPV use, and to me, it's a fascinating one because from our side, the challenges with FPV is from a capabilities perspective. Obviously, you can do incredible things, as anybody who's ever seen drone racing. You can do incredible things with controlling the drones, being able to see things for inspection. But the downside, and which has really prevented it from any kind of adoption, is it's just hard to fly. You need really skilled pilots, and for public safety or even most inspection companies, it's not feasible to do it. And that was, I mean, I think of all due respect to Brink, the early Brinks that were FPV only, they were just too complicated to fly. But as soon as they came out with a controlled version, uh, boom, people could fly them, and they were having a lot more success. And the new ones are there. Um, so it's going to be important, I think, moving forward because of what we're seeing now. That hey, maybe the benefits, whether it's for public safety tactical operations or even some really precision inspection, with the right pilots and the right training program, it may be time to relook at FPV control of commercial systems. So I don't know if either of your companies has looked into integrating FPV or not. So Mike, you seem to have come back. Okay, so do you want to start with you? Have you how have
can
you
you hear me okay now?
Yeah, you're good now. So
Okay, great.
so
Okay.
what are your thoughts on potentially looking at usage of FPV in general and with Evolve products specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So forgive me for a fairly strong view that I'm about to give.
Okay, give it to us.
But yeah, we've got a very clear opinion on this, and that is that FPV, drones basically have two very clear end user groups. The enthusiasts, like myself and probably Geoff, we just love stuff that fly. We want to fly it. We want to make it. But these are actually probably not the large target end user group for our drones. And we believe that the larger audience out there, the FPV is not for them. As you said yourself, it's you need very high end skills, hand to eye coordination, reaction speed, etc., to be good at FPV. As a product, as a user of a drone, we believe customers don't want to be overly involved in the operation of the drone. They want the imagery from it. They want the intel from it. They want it to help them do their job. They don't want to lock up a operator to be operating the drone too much. In fact, the less they can lock up a user, the better. We believe, one of the points of this webinar and one of the topics to cover was, what are the things going forward and what are the learnings and the pivots. And I think for us, the pivot has been as much autonomy as possible. The more autonomy, the better. I'm sure, well, hopefully some of you would have seen Blade Runner 2024 or 2042, whichever one it is, the second one. And you probably remember the scene where the guy arrives in the hover car and he gets out of it and he says to the drone, just like take pictures around here, and then walks off. This is what people are looking for. People and users are looking for a highly autonomous device that will give them the image that they need, and perhaps even not full motion video, but the system itself will actually detect the targets that are pre-programmed, or types of targets: armor, tanks, artillery, personnel wearing perhaps certain clothes, white armbands and whatnot, whatever, the Russian latest standard gear up has been, and then report upon finding that, but not feeding full motion video, because if you're in a hostile environment and if you're literally being shot at, the last thing you want is sitting there with your FPV goggles, not actually aware of your environment. So I am not against FPV personally. I believe it has a fantastic purpose in life, but not for the end users out there. In Ukraine, the need has driven the skills. So FPV drones were widely available. They're cheap. There's loads of them. You can build one yourself fairly easily. And the end users were already there. All of the drone enthusiasts in the country were able to just pick up their gear and transfer to the battlefield. And that's why I think we've seen such a big uprise in FPV in Ukraine. But actually, as the conflict, as the war evolves, and more volunteers and others are drafted into the conflict, I think the more autonomy and easier to use systems, that I think that's the way forward.
Okay,
I'll park it there.
fantastic. Geoff, what are your thoughts?
I think there's a use case for FPV in Ukraine, and they've clearly demonstrated it over and over. But is it ideal? No. I think the training, even in first responder space, you can't teach a course that is 50 hours of stick to surface flying in order for the OEM to be comfortable of signing off the operator that doesn't come back and bite you on warranties, right? It's a very specific niche skill set. It does kind of go to the point that sometimes simple is better, but for your standard inspection, ISR targeting type of missions, you're still going to have a need for that. And to kind of echo Michael's point, I think the next round of evolution, we're already working with a company, is voice commands. As a former operator, if I don't ever have to come off my gun to look at a video, and right now we're working with a company where you can give it commands and it'll do that, but we want Alexa, which is ATD ATR, and you say, Alexa, what's at the next intersection? Oh, I see a technical vehicle with a 14.7 and 3 guys with AKs. Stay there until I get there. You don't ever have to come off your primary job, right? The other thing is multi-vehicle control for us. That's a double-edged sword. You give a guy 4, 6 vehicles or combination of air vehicles and bots. Now you have to reduce the cognitive load. So working on that AI let the computer do the analyzing and identifying of the targets, and you select which ones you want to keep an eye on and which ones you don't. So again, these are all, even in the U.S. military, they're all secondary jobs, right? Their first job is to move, shoot, and communicate. So how do you lessen that cognitive load on the operators?
Fantastic. Yeah. So it's funny. I think you guys are spot on. It's fascinating to me because I myself, I'm not an FPV pilot. And anybody that's seen me is I'm actually a pretty shitty pilot overall, to be honest with you. But I would have said there's no chance in hell that FPV has any place. So I would have been in agreement. But having seen some of these, I'm rethinking it a little bit. I think there might be some middle ground. Everything you say is 100% correct, but I'm thinking that as this evolves, I think one thing we've learned is that UAVs are here to stay in the military and will continue to be ubiquitous in civilian life as well. The autonomy part is going to be huge, but for that small set of really really skilled operators, I think it will be invaluable. Now that's going to put the pressure on manufacturers like yourselves and partners like us to ensure that there's high level training programs in place that are going to enable them to do that. And that's not easy. Not everybody is going to be able to do that for sure. But yes, it's quite fascinating. Couple of other points. Geoff, you mentioned Starlink, so that's a perfect example of things that are being tested over there that are going to soon be tested for rural BVLOS applications, whether it's rural law enforcement, National Guard, Coast Guard, whatever. And then also, there's thousands and thousands of miles and kilometers of infrastructure that potentially are going to be in, in no LTE coverage or any kind of coverage. So the fact that we're learning on the go what we can integrate with Starlink is quite fascinating. And I think we're already seeing on the commercial side, people are asking us about, hey, are we able to do this with some of our autonomous technology? The other thing that you mentioned, even though we think it's a military thing, is the ability to get coordinates on the ground, drop a pin. We see that in some commercial systems, but real world application is, obviously there's tons of wildfires all over the place, and so there's been a huge interest in large drones for spotting wildfire, excuse me, but also cargo replenishment for wildfire, right? And so that's going to require all that same technology. We gotta light up the ground, and whether it's going to be some kind of guided parachute, we'll have Josh from AVSS on, and he'll talk about their technology for that, or some kind of a specific lander with a larger platform, be it a Sky Mantis or another larger platform. That's going to be a big deal. So already we can see where that's very powerful. One thing I was going to ask you.
Can I just make a quick addition to the
Yeah.
FPV points? So I think there's just one exception with FPV and where it really comes in. It's not really the fact that you are necessarily controlling the system through that method where you are seeing what it's seeing and you are able then to fly more precisely and more rapidly. It's more about the real estate. So you can see the two ground controllers behind me, the big one right by the wall and then the smaller chest mounted one. So those are still fairly small screens. So if you're trying to capture in high detail a scene and you really want to get into all the details and the technology is not there yet where, as Geoff was painting a picture of the future, where the system will be able to tell you itself what it's seeing. If you want to see every little pixel, then FPV gives you that. You get a very immersive view with a massive virtual screen that's literally corner to corner of your eyesight. That's where it comes in handy. So maybe in the thinking of it more as a viewing goggles rather than a way of piloting a system, that those FPV devices could be very useful for that.
Perfect.
And I think it also, let me caveat a little bit more on what Mike said and add one more thing to your list, Kevin. I also agree. I know that there are FPV programs out there that the military run. It's a very specific niche thing for a $600 drone that you don't care if it comes home. Right, you're not sacrificing your $100,000 system with your $50,000 payload, or even down to us in the 15, 16K range. They're not quite throwaways yet, but those you can build hundreds. You can fly them. You don't care if they come home. You pull out another one, load up another two, and off you go to do your business. Right. So it's a very specific niche thing. The point I was trying to make, though, is there is just a lot of training time. There is a market for that, and somebody will grab that training piece. It's not going to be us. But for those end users that want to do FPV, it will take a lot of time to get their students certified as competent operators. The last thing I would like to add to your list with all this multi-vehicle control and stuff is actually nesting operations as well along the border in cities. And we are working with a couple different companies on that have done a 12 and a 20 pack right now. That's fairly weather hardened, so it just shuffles them through. They come back and hit charge and rotate around the wheel until it's time for them to launch again. So I think in the next couple of years, nesting options and nesting capabilities are going to be highly desired by a lot of people, both in the commercial space and the military space.
Absolutely. So, and it's funny, we'll be talking about that over the course of the week as well. So you just mentioned one thing, and since you just came from one of the I don't want to say perpetrators, that's a bad word. One of the people that has sold really expensive systems. So obviously the doctrine has been like AV, Pumas and Ravens. Let's sell really expensive. We're going to have one or two. And the Ukraine seems to have like thrown that on its ear, where they've gone the complete opposite. From my understanding, is that it's a lot of cheap kind of homemade stuff as opposed to this really, really high end military stuff. Now, do you see this as a trend? Obviously, some of that is necessity, but how much is necessity versus kind of what you just said, which is maybe we need to think of some of this stuff really as much more disposable than we typically do.
Would you like me to go first, having been from my
Yes, I
former
was going to
employer?
pick on you
Yeah.
first. Yes.
It's very interesting to me, and I've had conversations with a couple individuals that are operating over there that are actually 3D printing fixed wing planes that fly for 3 hours, and they don't care if they come home, right? Because it's 3D printed. So I think from our international perspective, and we've been doing a lot of traveling for the last 9 months, they're looking for lower cost solutions. I know right now, system, with the exception of maybe of Mantis, they're not survivable in that you may get 2 flights out of it and that's it. So if you're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a platform that you get to fly once, maybe because of the environment, because of jamming, because of the GPS spoofing and blocking, it doesn't make sense. And if that means anything at all going forward, when you start talking peer near peer engagements, that's what you're going to see. This is what we can expect to see if there is another big engagement. So I think you'll see the DoD pivot, and probably some of the NATO countries pivot because they see what it looks like now. We haven't had this. We didn't have this in Afghanistan. We didn't have it in Iraq. We're not seeing it in Africa, but we are seeing it in Ukraine. So you kind of have to plan for that. And key indicators for us are how many science projects are being released by the government for this same type of stuff, and there are a lot. So,
Mike, what are your thoughts? Obviously, you have a slightly more expensive, sort of more military grade platform, as opposed to the
Not as
smaller one.
expensive as you'd think,
Well, oh, sorry. Let me. Yeah, it's
but
more
yeah,
expensive
relatively
than that.
speaking,
Yeah. So, what are
yeah.
your thoughts on that? How does that change like operational plans, or have you, are you looking at changing the way you do things on some new products, etc.?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely true that the classic battlefield planning and equipment that was in the works for literally decades by the West has suddenly been massively questioned. All of the very high-end UAVs that can operate for literally days, and then stepping it down to those that can operate for hours, but cost literally hundreds of thousands. Those are almost not utilized at all in Ukraine. However, it's the cheaper, smaller, easier ones that are. Partially due to availability, there's just not the budgets of Ukraine defense were not such that they allowed a stockpile of the more expensive ones. And secondly, it's the training and the deployability and the rollout of those systems to the front line. The systems and the drones that are needed in Ukraine, literally every single unit that is operating would like to have a UAV, and the more capable, the better. And they will take whatever they can get, and they'll take the DJIs or whatever else, Sky Mantis or Aerion, Sky Rangers, Teledyne, FLIR, whichever label. They're all highly sought after. But there's just not enough of them to go around. So that's why we're seeing a proliferation of small, cheaper drones, because everybody wants one and they'll take whatever they can get. So I think the learnings for us are, and not just from Ukraine, but generally over the last few years, is that drones are like vehicles or like computers or like mobile phones. There are lots of different types, and there's a use for each one of them. There's like a sliding scale of size and price and payload and capability and so on. And you've got some systems where for certain jobs, that is the only system you can take.
Right.
So for certain jobs, it'll only be the Puma or the MQ-9, and that you just can't get that job done with anything else. And then for other jobs, it'll be the Teal Golden Eagle. And then for other jobs, it'll be the Black Hornet. And for another job, it'll be the Sky Mantis. And I think there are obviously competitive solutions out there. The Sky Ranger is a direct competitor for the Sky Mantis, but I think Teal it's in a smaller, more compact, more portable category. And then below that, you'll have the Black Hornet and some other smaller drones. We've got 250 gram, sub 250 gram drone as well. That kind of sits in that area. But our 250 gram drone does not.
Oh, looks like we. Oh, Michael, you're.
Can you hear
Yeah, you're gonna. Can you unmute, Michael? Oh, there you go.
me now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll put it to that. Yeah, so I was just saying that the Sky Mantis can carry things like a mobile phone, mobile device, it's got a sort of scanner known as the IMSI catcher, and it can be really useful for lots of different applications, including things like finding lost people in an avalanche, where they'll still have their mobile phone in them, but they are absolutely visually non-detectable, thermal or otherwise. But you can pick them up through their mobile phone. So that device is upwards of a kilo for the smallest ones on the market,
Right.
and the larger ones, multiple kilos. You just can't carry it on the smaller drone. However, a small agile unit where they just cannot take a backpack the size of that behind me with them because they've got other gear that is essential to be carried. For them, a Teal would be a more perfect solution. So it really depends on what you're doing. It depends on what you are trying to deploy in the air, what you're able to carry. Are you on a vehicle? You're on foot. So I believe all drones out there have a use. They all have their unique features. There's a feature and capability matrix, I'm sure, that somebody's put together. And because of that, and in Ukraine, we're seeing this. We're seeing how all these different types are being utilized, where what works best. And I think those will be really interesting learnings to see what kind of category of drones is best suitable for what.
Yeah, excellent point.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to ask the panelists one more question here. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the chat box. We'll move to Q&A after this one. But I think what you've hit on, the different types, and again, this is something we're seeing commercially as well, is that as drone operations get more professionalized, pilots get more professionalized, but now we're getting in there where, it's no different. They're flying X number of types of aircraft. So Geoff, I think that's why what you guys are doing in your partnership with Tomahawk, and specifically what Tomahawk is doing with this concept of a universal remote that's going to control not only multiple aerial vehicles in a swarm, but multiple brands of aerial vehicles, types of aerial vehicles, and also ground. And so for us, again, when we're designing training for this, it makes it much easier because now we're training on one interface, one set of controls. For the signals people, it's one data port out, and it's much more efficient in terms of operation. So maybe Geoff, if you could quickly talk about your partnership with Tomahawk and why you see that's important to what you want to roll out moving forward.
Sure. So as Kevin alluded to, we are strategic partners with Tomahawk Robotics and their Kinesis ecosystem, and it brings a lot of advantages to us. We personally like their Kinesis UI so much that we have licensed it from Tomahawk to put on our 10-inch Samsung tank.
Oh, lost audio. Geoff, we lost your audio.
I had to relaunch my browser a couple of times actually through this session. It sometimes loses connection.
Okay.
I think he's doing it.
Yeah. So we'll come back to him. So Mike, talk about a couple of key partnerships that Evolve has as well, and not necessarily that same vein, but in some general terms.
Yeah, I think partnerships are extremely important. We've got a number with radio providers and with other component providers where we don't try to build everything and reinvent all the wheels. And now with the controller integration, like Geoff was talking about Tomahawk, it is also a potential partner for us. we're on a strong path to integrate with the ATAC or the CivTAC system. It's already part of the MPU5, the Persistent Systems Radio integration. So it just plugs in nicely into that because, as I was saying at the beginning about integrating into what's already there, be it a radio system, radio network that's already deployed, and using a radio from that network, equally using existing controls, and then, like you say, Kevin, it makes your training burden easier, and for the operator to use the same UI makes it easier. So, that's a key one for us as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. Have we got Geoff back, or? I don't think so. Okay, so let's maybe quickly throw it open for some audience questions. You can put them in the chat as well. I got a question by text actually for you, Mike. So one of the questions was, what from a product development perspective is next for Evolve? Is that going to be a smaller platform, or that's just going to be additional sensors on the SkyManus platform? What do you see is the next steps for you?
Yep. I think Geoff is back. I'll answer quickly.
Am I on with no video now?
Yeah. Well, we just had a quick question for Mike. Let's let him answer that, and then we'll throw it right back to you for Tomahawk, Geoff.
Yep. Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the answer is both of the things that you named. So additional sensors and also the capability really. So taking things to the next level, making the system more autonomous, extending flight time through new battery chemistry, just some of the things that we're working on. And then the smaller systems bringing to full service level the sub 250 gram platform Nano. You guys obviously have had a play with it when the first beta came out. So getting that launched. And probably watch this space, probably doing something in between. So not quite a SkyMantis, but a little bit bigger than a Nano. I think there is a gap there. So that's next for us.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mike. Okay, Geoff, sorry, back to you on the Tomahawk. We just heard you had partnered with Kinesis for licensing the UI.
Yeah, so can everybody hear me now?
We can.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So we've partnered with them, and we're going to be loading their Kinesis software onto our 10-inch Samsung tablet, our TAC controller. But what it comes down to, even with all of our partnerships with Reveal, with Reveal Technologies, with Athena AI, with Tomahawk Robotics, small companies can't do everything on their own. Some will tell you they can, but they can't. So we're all about strategic partnerships, and to the expense of the drone, I want to be able to hold my baseline price, but offer options, right? Everybody has a toolbox with a whole bunch of different tools in it, and I want to be able to let them bolt on a heavy lift kit that'll carry 4 pounds of something, rail-mounted, really good night payload that's quick disconnect, or good day payload, because the base offering should be EO and IR. But in this space, and I laugh because we have this new 645-12 payload we just put out, and I tell the CEO, I said, that's going to get us about 9 months. And then they're going to want another new payload, and they're going to want to fly farther, and they're going to want to fly longer. And it's just this vicious cycle for industry to constantly adapt. But if they want a $100,000 drone that weighs 2 pounds because they're bolting on all those accessories, that's on them, and it's a decision they make. I'm just here to offer those options to them.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I think you've hit on the head. So, any other questions from the audience out in the chat room? We got anything, Jonathan? Okay. All right. So I'd like to say a big thanks to Geoff and Mike. Gentlemen, it was a pleasure. We really thank you for joining us today. For the rest of the people watching live, if you look in the chat, there are links to all the remaining sessions for the rest of the week. You can go on, click on those, and sign up for those directly. Right, and there's also links to the websites for Evolve and Teal. And sorry, and we do have another question before we sign off from Alex. So this one's for you, Mike. is, I think you might have talked about it a little bit earlier, but have you done any work or testing on the 5G network yet?
Yeah, we've done work on 5G, 4G, LTE, and we don't see anything extra special with the 5G network, but we do see a need to have the system come with an option where it can operate through an existing mobile network, 3G, 4G, LTE currently, as it's mostly deployed around the world. 5G is coming online in the UK, in the US, in Canada, and other parts of the world. A little bit early days for it. We don't see a need for ultra high bandwidth with UAV operation. So 5G doesn't bring something to the mobile operation that's so critical. But I think generally, systems that are locked into proprietary radio, be it persistent systems or anything else, they are limited because, especially in urban environments, plugging into existing infrastructure just makes a lot of sense. So yes, we have done work and we will be bringing out an option for that.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for the question, Alex. All right, everybody. So thanks again for joining us. As I said, tomorrow will be digitization and digital twins. So we've got infrastructure in the morning and digitizing the mine in the afternoon with some excellent panelists. And we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And gentlemen, once again, from Evolve and Teal, thank you very much for joining us and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much for having
Thanks,
us.
sir. Thanks, Kevin.